Oh God. Oh, you're literally at 12. Let's just do the morning. Thanks for staying with us on TVC News on our continued coverage of the off-cycle elections in Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa. And my colleague, Kemi, just before she signed off, was just saying, look, it's been, a lot has happened. And really, when you look at the days leading up to this election, Saturday, which was the election, and today we've seen collation ongoing, a lot has really happened. We've subjected them to analysis here on TVC. We've had a lot of people come in, talk about it, and observers as well who monitored this election. Also, giving us the take on what they observed on the field. We know that the governor of Imo State has been declared the winner of the election in Imo State. We're just now waiting for Bayelsa, which will resume collation at 6. And Kogi, which will resume collation at 7 p.m. And at that time, within that time frame, hopefully we'll get to know who the winner of that election in both states are. But let me bring in my guest, because we need to look at more of the things that have been playing out in the days leading up to this election, during this election, and now that collation is ongoing. I'm joined by a political analyst. He's also the president, Team Nigeria for Change. He is Best Man Jumbo Unze. Good to have you join us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
We're just talking about how interesting the couple of days has been leading up to this election, the election itself, and now that we're having collation. But let me just get your general assessment, of all that has played out, even now that collation is ongoing in Bayelsa and Kogi.
Well, if we have to be sincere and honest to ourselves, we know there's nothing new. Because we've had this tradition of people who feel probably the election results might not be favorable to them. I think they know from the very beginning, and they hit up the polity most times. It happened in Kogi, it happened in Bayelsa, it happened in Imo. Prior to the election, we saw the breakback between the APC and the SDP party, the Muritala Jaka, the candidate of the SDP, always coming out to say there's so much violence being perpetrated by the APC. The APC will counter him to say, it's your people who are attacking us. So, like we all say, there's always three sides to a story, your side, my side, and the truth. So, same thing in Imo State, We saw the build-up to the election, how that even the NLC president, Comrade Jairo, got directly involved and had his own issues, which led to the issue of strike in Imo State, which led to them picketing the airports for those going to Owerri. So we also saw all those build-up, and it wasn't peaceful. For once, I was surprised that the build-up to the election in Bayelsa wasn't what it used to be.
But there were attacks as well.
When I say it wasn't what it used to be, it was nothing compared to what we are used to in Bayelsa. Of course, there was their normal hits-ups too. There was also the violence, pockets of violence here and there, counter-accusations, the PDP accusing the deputy governorship candidate of the APC of stoking violence. Of course, we had him say something like, hey, if they come at you, go back at them. So it was something we are used to. So it wasn't strange to me. Now the election proper, of course, coming to the election proper, it's also our usual not wanting to accept that you didn't do well, even in mobilization. A couple of times, some parties do not even have agents everywhere. And when the results start coming in, you complain that it was not posted to IREV. But like we're also used to, what we have, do we have situations where what is being collated is different from what your agents have? So, by and large, it's a tradition that we just must change. Our democracy is evolving, and we must outgrow some things.
Absolutely. And I would get that, especially to that part of the polling agents or parties not having polling agents in certain unit. It's a polling unit. And then some of the fracas and concerns being raised, at the collation center. But I wanted to ask you, with all that we saw before this off-cycle election in these 3 states, you have also highlighted some of the things we saw. And some of the outcomes we're now seeing. Are you surprised? Especially in a place like Imo State, a lot of rhetoric going on. Governor Hope Uzodinma was largely referred to as Supreme Court governor. It didn't seem as though he had any leg to stand on with this particular election, but he won with a landslide. And when you look across other states, are you surprised? I
will be very honest with you, and at the risk of sounding patronizing, I was surprised by the outcome of the results in Imo State. To the extent that the picture, the Labour Congress painted of Hope Uzodinma and Imo State vis-a-vis his relationship with the working class, the civil servants, they painted a picture of hell for the civil servants. And when you listen to former chairman of NLC in Imo State come up to say, no, this is not true. I'm like confused. My greatest surprise was this same Hope Uzodinma won virtually all the local governments. I was expecting the APC to win in Imo State because I talk to people a lot. I publish, of course, I'm a publisher. So during our interviews with some people from Imo State, you will hear that Supreme Court governor, I don't like him, but he's doing well. I've had that severally. They just have this, probably because he's APC. And APC is not the main party in Southeast. But you will hear them, much as they criticize him, say to you, I don't like him, but the guy, they work. So winning was not that surprising for me. But the fact that he could win in virtually all the local governments was a big surprise to me. If I have to take into consideration the picture of gloom that was painted by the Labour Congress. Kogi, before I came into the studio, I was telling somebody, I said, yesterday morning, I made a post on my Facebook page and I said, APC will win in Kogi because Dino as a PDP candidate is no match. That's what I said. And that's because I've also studied I was in Kogi for like 4 years, up to 3 years ago. I was doing some projects in Kogi. So I knew the psychology of the average Okun person, the psychology of the average Igala man, and that of the Ibira man. When APC presented Ododo, the initial hiccups here and there, as to somebody from Kogi, from the Ibira land, which is where the incumbent governor is from, also take over after 8 years. And that was that initial issue. But if you understand politics, it's not about emotions. A lot of people just come out and expose show their emotions, sentiments, even prejudice at times. But when it got to the nitty-gritty of doing the work to win election, those that understand the game know what to do. Sometimes it's not about vote buying also. It's also about how are you able to mobilize? How are you able to sell your ideas? How are you even able to sell your grievances? Because you had issues that, why should this person be the candidate? How were you able to sell that grievance to the people?
So, because sometimes it's also a protest vote.
Exactly. You know, sometimes you by selling your grievances, you could attract protest votes. And people say, yes, I agree with you. Even if I don't want to vote for your party, I'll vote for you now. Because you package your grievances well enough to make it attractive to the voter. So, as time went by, I looked at the Kogi situation and I said to myself, it's likely the APC candidate will win. Why? He's going to have bulk votes. Whether we like it or not, we still play politics of a bit of ethnicity.
Even though, let me just say that we're still waiting for coalition to reconvene in Kogi at 7 p.m. and then hopefully we'll get the final results and find out who will win that election. But this is just speaking hypothetically.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, go ahead.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see the APC candidate, like I was saying, because I see him getting enough votes from that side where he is from. Then you have the Okun land, which is Kogi West, where Dino is from, the PDP candidate. There where Abejide, the ADC candidate, is from. But you know something? They're going to share the votes. This guy will get a chunk of it, Dino will get a chunk of it, while the APC loyalists are just one. The APC will vote for APC. Now the opposition will share their votes.
So basically you're saying that in Kogi, it was really about, not more of the individuals, but first the location and then the ability to work out the numbers.
Ability to work out the numbers. Location is key, which is tribe and ethnicity, which is what Governor Yabelo over the last 8 years was trying to say. We need to move away from this Igala agenda, Ibira agenda, Okun agenda to a Kogi agenda. That's what he's been saying. How really isn't it, I might not be able to say, but that's been his philosophy. So when I look at the Igala land and I say to myself, wow, if you combine the two other senatorial districts, it's now up to 50,000, with which they are more than, with which they will say the total number of votes from the Igala land, maybe just 50,000 more from the two other senatorial districts. So if you're able to win Kogi East, which is Igala land, I should say, then you stand a good chance. But in this case also, there are also 2 or 3 other candidates from that side. And don't forget, a lot of political appointees under Governor Yaya Bello are from Igala land. And they have a mandate to win their zones, to win their units, to win their awards.
So a lot was at stake. Let's go to break now. We'll look at more on this, especially just in general, how much ethnicity played in this election, how much, the role of religion and all of that also played in this election. We'll take a break now. When we return, a lot of other issues to discuss. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching our coverage of the off-cycle elections in Imo, Kogi, and Bayelsa. We have the results in from Imo already, where the winner has been declared. It is Governor Hope Uzodinma. We're waiting for that collation to reconvene at 6 p.m. in Bayelsa and 7 p.m. in Kogi. I still have my guest in the studio, political analyst and President Team Nigeria for Change, best man Jumbo Unzig. Thanks for staying with us. Just before that break, we were talking about some of the things, that could have led to the results we're seeing now. You were analyzing Kogi State, but I want us to quickly go back to issues around in Imo State before we come back to Kogi State. And I want to look at the NLC issue again, because it looked as though it was a very big issue. There was a power outage, and people thought, oh, look, if there's power outage for a couple of days, this could whip up sentiments against the governor. Thinking, look, you are the reason we are in this situation. But it didn't seem to have worked that way. And that one wonders the psyche, how the psyche of the average voter works, in that particular state or just generally in Nigeria.
Is it different things come to play in winning an election? Somehow we are evolving. Our democratic process is evolving, and people are getting wiser. Some are getting, what I would use to say, more political intelligence. Because at the risk of sounding maybe partisan, it was obvious the NLC president had an interest. It was obvious. So the average Imolite too will have seen beyond the facade of saying you are coming to fight for workers in Imo State. When the Imo State chapter of the NLC are not raising dust, hey, don't get it wrong. There's no worker in Nigeria that doesn't want better service, no matter how much they are getting right now. No matter how much you are getting, the living conditions are a bit tougher. So everybody will want. But the way the NLC president took it upon himself to make Imo an issue at the point of election was quite suspicious. Then when he had his fracas with his labor people, according to him, the police handed him over to the guys. I wasn't there, so I'm not going to make any emphatic statements based on what we read. So that alone blew it up to the extent they made sure they cut power because he had so much solidarity with the union that has to do with electricity, since that's where he came from. He was one of them. They cut flights to Owerri and disturbed the flow of normalcy in Imo State. So everybody would have thought, but like I said, the political awareness is much more now than it used to be. The average, until recently, the East are always aligning with the top. Most Eastern states don't like playing politics of opposition to the federal. Until recent time when we had them, we are beginning to see dichotomies based on ethnic issues, wanting some agitating for secession, some agitating for the Biafran Republic. The average Imo person wants his state to be aligned to the federal. And in Hope Uzodinma, they will see that. And like I said, I did a lot of talking to, and people would tell me, I do not like this Hope because of how he came. How can fourth become first? But at the end, they would say, but the guy that walks out, the guy don't do one or two things. So it will speak for him. Whether I would like it or not, the Ajero influence didn't eventually matter like he expected and like many in opposition expected. Some are even saying that he probably has political ambition and is trying to build it. But there's a better way to go about things.
But what about the Peter Obi effect? Because a lot of people, after the general election, especially in the East and the South, just especially in the South and the Southeast, started to align with the Labour Party, running under that platform, or running on that platform rather, because they felt that, look, with the wave that we saw during the general election around him, it might help them whip up some sentiments and some votes and so people started running on that platform. But we did not see that at play in Imo State. One would have thought that, look, because of that election, Labour Party would take over the Southeast, but that doesn't seem like it's the case.
Peter Obi was the beneficiary of I wouldn't want to use some strong words, because the Buhari government, probably what we expected probably wasn't what we got. People became disenchanted somehow, despite the fact that it's actually the government that did so much with infrastructure. But the security issues really kind of blighted the great works done by that government. So people were disillusioned. Now, they saw an Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu as a part of the system, and I took part of it. So, what was the next escape platform? Was a Peter Obi. Mark my words, Peter Obi was significantly different from the Labour Party. The Peter Obi thing was a movement. They followed him. And yeah, it worked for him. There was so much results here and there for the man Peter Obi. But has he managed that belief system which he benefited after the election? If I look at it, I would say no. So much bitterness being eschewed after the election, even after the Supreme Court judgment. Everybody was supposed to say, okay, we give up. Oh yeah, let's play opposition while working for the betterment of the country. I've not seen that. And in that regard, people are done with, in quote, the obedient thing. And you cannot equate it with the Labour Party, which doesn't have that relevant structure to compete with APC and PDP. Again, does Peter Obi see himself as that poster boy for Labour Party? I would say no, because he didn't go around with the Labour Party candidates in these three parties. Yeah, it was in Imo State.
It was in Imo State.
I saw him in Imo State. But probably that was just one of the campaigns he came for. Unlike when Asiwaju was building the AD that metamorphosed to the APC we have today, when President Obasanjo was winning over everywhere, Asiwaju was everywhere campaigning with the ACN. Let me even say with the AD then, that metamorphosed to AC and ACN. He was everywhere, which we do not see a Peter Obi do now. So the Peter Obi influence was obvious. It's obviously non-existent.
It's about taking ownership and leadership of the party. But I also wanted to ask you, does this also speak to the maturity of the voter? Because it would also seem as though people are now looking at, on individual basis. As you come, we address the case. It is not about, party or, the emotions and the sentiment. Yes. Does it speak to the maturity of the voter?
Which is why I said our democratic values are evolving. People are getting wiser. They can separate the party. I'll give a good example. During the presidential election, 2023 election in Lagos, Team Nigeria was deeply involved. We're everywhere. And we saw before the presidential election, we'll campaign, we'll go around talking to people, mobilizing and then voter sensitivity, and we'll ask some vital questions. They'll tell us, a lot of people say, we are voting Peter Obi, but we are voting Sanwo-Olu for governor. And that was strange to me. It wasn't about party. They said, now Obi will go vote for president, but we go vote Sanwo-Olu for governor. And if you actually look at the results, it actually came that way. Of course, the APC got a rude awakening after the presidential to increase their level of campaign and everything. But the people now know that they can cherry pick from the parties. So it's not something we should be so surprised that the Labour Party that cleared Southeast for presidential election for Obi are now not, they are not, most people are not even coming second. They are coming third, distant third. So the Nigerian voters are getting more politically intelligent and they are wiser.
And is there a difference between how the voter or the average voter voted in the general election and what we are seeing now in these 3 states? And I'm going to get to the figures in just a moment, but I want to get your opinion on that.
Oh, yes, there's a shift. And like I also said, I was talking to somebody this morning, I said, if the general election was repeated, we'll have a different result. The rate at which even Peter Obi did so well in Lagos and some other places, even in Southeast, we won't have that same percentage now. It will be far less because a lot of issues were also at play at the general election, which are not there now. Remember the cash issues. It was just prior to the general election that we had the Emefiele cash policy, currency policy, which destabilized a lot of families, which turned it turned some people said I became an overnight poor man. So those factors are not at play now. Therefore, we cannot. It's obvious to say that this off-cycle election, even with the results we are seeing, ran contrary to what we saw at the presidential election. So I'm not surprised at that too.
Right, so let's talk about, let's start looking at the figures, but let's talk about the voter turnout in the 3 states. Was it impressive for you? What's your thought when you compare that to the number of registered voters? And then we also compare that, and I'm going to give you the figures in just a moment, but I just want to get your general view of it with what we saw during the presidential election.
I was surprised that we even had the figures recorded in Imo State because of the prevalent security situation.
And it seemed to be higher.
I was surprised because I was expecting that apathy, that fear, not because they didn't want to vote, but because some of them have been so intimidated and some of them fear have been put into them by reason of the security situation in the state. But so I'm quite impressed with what happened in Imo State. In Kogi, build up to the election, yeah, threats here and there, violence here and there, but the average Kogi person loves to vote. They might have a large number that are registered, but are not, for those who are at home, because they move a lot. A lot of the average Kogi person, most of them are in Abuja, most of them are in other neighboring states. Don't forget, Kogi is still bound by like 9 other states. So they move a lot. But for the average Kogi person, he is always involved when it comes to election. So for that turnout, yeah, it could be better. It could be better. Bayelsa also, so much threats. But like I said, the threats this time was not, the violence that we saw was not as much as it used to be. And why they didn't really come out and mass in Bayelsa is like a bit of a surprise to me.
In Imo, I think somebody was having a conversation with me yesterday and said, look, that she was really surprised that, she was really scared for Imo. But it turned out that, look, some of the issues she was, afraid of happened in Kogi and not in Imo. And she was wondering, what's going on? What's happening? And I want to ask you, what do you think played out there? And where should the commendation go?
I've also learned over the years that where you expect so much violence, most times election will just come and go. I remember in 2015, Nigeria will boil. Nigeria will scatter. Eventually, elections came. If you look at Imo, there's so much attention on Imo. And I know the security agencies must have upped their game, and they must have taken much cognizance of the situation, sent more men there. And maybe the state governor must have also done 1 or 2 things to assure them of their safety. But whether we like it or let's give, because when we have issues, we are quick to condemn the security agencies. This time, let's give them kudos. They did probably, let's just say they did well.
We saw that show of force in Imo with, they had almost more than 80 gun trucks being, delivered to Imo.
Yes.
Our correspondent, Bimba, maybe he was in a chopper with the Frankumba, DIG Frankumba, and you could see that they were ready for, and so should the commendation also go to the security agency?
Exactly, because we are easy to condemn them when it doesn't meet expectation. So if we look around and say, hey, the Imo that we thought was going to boil is doing so well, I mean, we should just give them the commendation. Praise the state government, praise the federal government, thank you, the security agencies, they did well in Imo State.
What about Bayelsa? We saw just before that where an INEC staff was abducted, eventually released. I think a day or two later, INEC also announced that he had been released, she had been released rather. And so, do you think that perhaps all of that would also contribute to the psyche of the voter to say, look, if this is already happening, just few days to that election, a few hours to that election, perhaps it might be a difficult terrain? Yeah,
you see, like I said, the Bayelsa situation also surprised me because, like, if you just do it by reason of hindsight, the elections in Bayelsa have always been, even the Joy Youth Council president I was interviewed said, no, this will not happen. Bayelsa will not always be a violent, prone area. They kind of worked to have the relative peace, the relative tranquility that they had for this election. Because everybody
I like that you say relative because they were attacks.
Relative.
Actually relative. Because even just after the signing of the peace accord, we saw how
some even refused to sign.
Exactly. So one of the candidates did not even show up. But we saw that the statement coming from the two major candidates accusing each other already just after accusing each other of attacks, and that again. Do you think that could have contributed?
Well, I would like to know it contributed, but see, sometimes I'd rather have you speak than act. Like I said, there have been times where a week or two to that election, there'll be violence everywhere in Bayelsa. There'll be kidnapping, especially the heydays of the militants. But you see, that is becoming a thing of the past now. Somehow, we'll get there. It's not as if it's Uhuru yet. But see, there's also something I've noticed that I tell people, they say, I won't vote because my vote does not count. It's not true anymore in Nigeria. Votes count. If votes don't count, why I say votes count is this, because what politicians now do is because they know vote counts, let's disrupt that area where you are strong, where you get good votes that will come into count. So there'll be violence there, so you don't vote there because they know vote counts. The days of writing results are gone. The forensic evidences now will bring it out. Beavers will show for accreditation. You can't collect my card and use it to vote anymore. Therefore, votes count. So those are things we now need to let our people know that please go and vote. But you see, the tough one now is how do we make sure that every ward, every unit have the security to vote? Because what they do now is, if Party A is strong in a Kosi, Alade Lola unit, let's make sure the elections there are disrupted, so no votes, and move from there to the collation center.
As the system matures, politicians are maturing along with the system. I said I was going to look at the figures with you, and I wanted to start with Imo, where during the presidential election, we saw about 476,000 accredited voters out of about 2 million, over 2 million registered voters. But in this particular election, I'm trying to get that figure, but we already see that the governor is leading. The governor won with over 500,000 votes.
That won in the first 20 local governments
declared all. So that already shows you that with that over 500,000, that is above the 476,000 that was recorded in during the presidential election. But the idea is that people don't turn out more for the gubernatorial election as much as they turn out for the presidential election. That has always been the idea. But why are we seeing this change in Imo?
To a large extent, to when your destiny is attached to something, you go all out. Hey, during the presidential, the stake wasn't that high for the governor, whether I would like it or not. It's just, okay, it's my party, I must work for my party to win. But in this case, it's my own. Whatever it takes, I must go out there, talk to people,
get people to come out.
make sure they come out, even if I have to create some nice incentives that will make them come out. So the greatest instinct in man is survival instinct. So it's for him to survive, so he has to do everything. So it should be expected.
So for those who are calling for the cancellation of off-cycle elections, there are pros and cons to it. There are benefits to it as well. When you are basically just focused on your own election and not that, of your party as well at the national level.
I differ from those calling for that we should do everything to have all the elections in one day. I differ. In fact, if I have my way, I should say we should have maybe 4 or 5 election cycle in 1 year, so that we will concentrate all our efforts and energies to have credible elections. We've seen over the years that INEC could be overwhelmed, even as much as they want to give us the best, even as much as they are doing every year trying to improve. We are 36 states. We are 200 million people. Our technological infrastructure is not yet top-notch when it comes to elections and democratic process. So, assuming we have the 36 states having probably 10 or 12 states having elections, we'll have enough security forces, enough observers, enough, INEC will have enough probably personnel to do what they need to do. So I differ. I've always said these off-cycle elections should even be much more institutionalized so I can get the best.
Like you have in the US, where you have, the general election and the midterm election,
exactly.
where you are focused, at every point in time on who you are voting for.
Exactly.
But what about the resources that could also take?
To a large extent, you just find out that we might even spend less. We don't know. You see, you can't miss what you don't know. And until you try something, you can't give an empirical evidence about it. So it might not just be. And if it will just cost a little bit more to have credible elections, that the winners will be known, declared as people voted for them, not the ones that the courts will be telling us who won the elections. And for how long are we going to continue like this? When we finish an election, the next is to move to the courts.
Is that the system or the politicians? Because, even in cases, we've had people say, look, don't even bother to contest this particular election. It was clear, it was a landslide victory. And yet, the opposition or those who did not win that election will still go to court. And so is it about the system or about the politician?
We also cannot, I have a saying I'll say, you can't divorce marketing from the cultural realities of a people. We are who we are. The average Nigerian politician does not want to give up. Even when it's obvious he lost, we might not be able to help such a person. But I know that the moment we do the right things institutionally, when the man goes to court, just like the last presidential tribunal virtually disgraced the lawyers of the PDP and the Labour Party in their judgment, made them look like, they might not say that way, but it looked like, are you guys really up to the positions you occupy? Because there are some things that they brought to the courts that the courts were like, even lawyers that just left school wouldn't do that. The Supreme Court affirmed the same things too. By the time we continue like this over time, and the system is not giving those politicians the opportunity to misbehave, who will get it? Many of them, You come to court with some flimsy or lousy petition, and the court slams heavy fine on you, it will stop, it will reduce. So more often than not, we have the problem of who we are, our people. We just don't give up. And yes, maybe the institution gives room for some of those things for now.
And that institution will be INEC. And
yeah, most likely the INEC, INEC mostly. Which are probably the security agencies. But there have been times security agents were also accused. So all the agencies that join forces with INEC to conduct our elections are the ones that will now look at it and say, how can we up our game?
But in this off-cycle election, has INEC done well by your assessment?
I was done well in 3 states. Yeah, we still had issues of late electoral materials getting to some places late. We still had such issues where they started voting some places late. Have they done well? They just did what I was expecting them to do better.
So was there an improvement to the general election or the same thing? Or was there a setback?
There was no setback. And I can't judge the general election with just 3 states. So if I do that, I would say then they did well with general election because just 3 states. I think they could have done much better here. And they also had issues with beavers issues in some places on these just 3 states. So, but I think
we saw, at least some people will say, look, in terms of IRF, they were, at the time we were looking at it, or just following that report, you know, it was at a very high, some of the results had to reach a very high percentage. At some point it was 60%, in some states 89% upload. And so wasn't that also, wouldn't we consider that an improvement?
with 3 states, we could if we must use the IRF, must do it 100%. With just 3 states, must be 100%. Maybe at worst 95, but we still had hiccups. But they didn't call it glitches this time. We still had hiccups here and there. And I'm not the kind of person that just that likes to probably run down an institution for some errors. As I said, it could have been better. And with what they have now, used for just 3 states, I sincerely believe they could have done better.
In what area?
In the area of technology, in the area of materials getting to the centers on time, in the area of elections starting on time, in the area of IREV, real time uploading. Logistics
is within...
We have places where they did manual accreditation.
So some people will say, look, logistics is within the control of INEC. But we saw that whilst, especially in Bayelsa, where some of their staff also, their boats almost capsized. Thank God that they were saved. And so you see that in those kind of cases, it's out. And I'm not holding sway for INEC, but I'm just ensuring that we look at this objectively and have the right assessment. Now, in that situation, where you would then have to remobilize those staff, and then you have to also consider their safety, one wonders, if there's anything that could have been done. Then there are people who will also say when it comes to beavers and when it comes to IRF, it is subject to technology. Yeah. And then we know that around the country, we could have a good network here, and then you drive 5 minutes away, and that network disappears. Perhaps that is also not within the control of INEC. Do you agree with that? Do you think that there's more that INEC could have done?
The waterways in Bayelsa didn't just suddenly spring up. It's always been there. So I could have done my mock exercise to know which is possible. But like I said, it's easier said. So I'm talking now, but when it gets to real deployments, yeah, like we said, we could have technical hitches. You might not have direct control over technology, but there's always an excuse for failure. And I'm that person that there's no excuse good enough for failure for me.
And I like that you talk about, the mock arrangement in that preparation, because we see INEC do the mock accreditation with voters in several states and say, okay, let's try this thing out. Could that also, could that extend to other areas, again, considering the resources?
I don't think INEC ever complained of resources in terms of both financial and human. But you see, we must also give it to them. There are factors that might just come up, that might just be beyond them at the point of implementation. But like I said, for the man that I've given assignments to, there's no excuse good enough for failure for me. That does not mean that I still does not see the things that hindered you. But
it cannot be a regular hindrance.
Exactly.
Right, but let's go back to those figures we were looking at earlier. We had talked about Imo State. Kogi, the full result isn't in, so we might not be able to get the number of voters that were accredited for this particular election. But let's look at the 2023 general election for the presidential election. We saw how it was, the number of registered voters were about 1.9 million. In Kogi.
Okay.
And then the accredited voters for that election was 484,000. And then in 2019, where it was 1.6 registered, the accredited voters were 636,000. And so it dropped while the number of registered voters increased, the number of accredited voters dropped between 2019 and 2023. Again, what is responsible for that? And do you think that there might be slightly an increase, to that of the presidential election in this election?
A couple of factors work against or work to affect voters' turnout and the participation of citizens in the electoral process. Don't forget that between 2019 and 2023, the effects of the COVID pandemic was there, was strong. A lot of people are still recovering, and some of them will just say, "Please leave me alone." A lot of those who are farmers, who had issues with herdsmen those days and banditry is affected, and Kogi was also a bit, had their own share of the farmers and bandits issues. So many would feel dejected and do careless. It might just be a major issue when you look at the accredited voters of 2019 and that of 2023. And don't also forget, like I said, a lot of us, by virtue of what I do, I'm always on the streets, in the inner cities, in the neighborhoods, talking with people and seeing people. A lot of people were affected by the cash Emefiele currency issue. If you know the extent to which it made people say, "I am not voting, I am not coming out. They've say my son is in the hospital, I can't even do this." No, it was so that alone, where they were just devastating enough to have affected the figure we had in 2019 and that of 2023. And now you see that slightly, was it in Imo that we noticed that slightly it increased from what we had at the presidential tournament, because people are getting a bit more settled back into their daily activities despite the security challenges, but at least the issue of I can afford to go and buy stuff is there with them now. So I put it so much on those factors. Well, of course, maybe voters' awareness, voters' education was probably not enough, probably because what I'm not able to hold my hands on, I can't empirically say this is what it costs. But the one I know, by reason of being there on the streets, the cash issue affected a lot of people.
What about the psychology and just the emotional experience during the presidential election for people? Do you think that, look, for those who the candidates did not win, will probably just go, you know what, let's just stay back home? That effect from the general election, would it play out in this particular election too?
Because we noticed that the numbers we have from president to now didn't really drop. Either it stabilized or it went up a bit. And I must tell you, a lot of people, especially those who are not directly involved, whose candidate didn't win. I've said, oh, please, let me continue my life. Some of them have started even queuing behind the current president. Some of them have said, oh, please, I need to. Some of them could even say, oh, I thought this was this with this candidate. Now I'm seeing better. Let me come back here. So basically, we can't pin the voters to one reason or just box them here. A lot of things contribute to the decisions voters take in Nigeria now. Sometimes, I give you a very example that's so funny. I was talking to somebody, I said, will you vote for Babajide Sanwo-Olu for second time? I asked the question. And he said no. And I was like, why? He said there's a particular appointee that he has, that if he wins, he will reappoint that person. And he doesn't like that person.
That was just the person's reason.
That was his reason.
So there are several reasons, several factors that impact on the voting pattern.
The decisions taken. I was in Kogi one time. I was talking with people and I asked the guy, sorry, where are you from? He said he's Igala. And I said, will you vote Yaya Bello? That's for his second time. And the guy said, no. And I was like, why? He said, even if Yaya Bello buy me a house, give me a car, I will not vote for him. I said, why? He said, because it is the right of the Igala man to rule Kogi. That was his own reason. And there are many like that with him. So a lot of factors come to play when it comes to why people want to vote this way or why people say, I'm not even voting at all. Different reasons.
But people who have those kind of reasons, whether it's the reason of the appointee or the reason of ethnicity, in some cases, they are in the minority. Right? And when I say some cases,
not minority.
No, I'm talking about, no, when I say some cases, in a place like Kogi, it could be
it's a major issue.
A major issue. In a place like Edo State, it could be a major issue. But in a place like Imo, it's not going to be a major issue. Do you understand what I'm saying? Where
the case of ethnicity.
Yes.
In Imo.
In Imo, it might not be a major issue because it is the Southeast. They are majorly Igbo speaking. But there are states where people speak, this is the major language. It might not be an issue. But we have states where you have pockets of languages.
Totally.
Just a minute, I'm going somewhere, and I will let you speak to that. Okay, so address that first of all before we get to the question I was going to ask you.
So I don't lose.
Yes, go ahead.
I'll give you two examples in the world. Bayelsa is one of the most homogeneous states in Nigeria. Same language, same religion, same everything. Yet, the electoral dichotomy and bickering is high. Somalia is about the...
Would that be ethnicity?
Now we look at it. What is it? Let's say those of us from Nembe, those of us from here, despite the homogeneity that they have. So somehow, do we now call that ethnicity or tribal issues? Now we need to define the basis to say this tribe and this tribe. Is it just language? Is it geographical location, ancestral location? Just like we have in Somalia. Somalia is about even not about the most homogeneous states in the world, where everybody is the same. Same language, same religion, same everything. And they've been at war for almost 40 years against each other. So somehow, ethnicity plays a major role.
We're expanding ethnicity not to just mean the fact that people speak the same language.
Exactly.
So as long as you're from within the same geographical location, for example, if you are from a particular local government or a particular village, you say, oh, look.
Probably.
It's
getting to that stage where, in Imo, for example, they have to come up with there's something they call, which will now make them rotate the governorship among, they call it Imo something, I've forgotten. They have a leader for it now who is in charge of that. Let's say a committee to say next one is Olu.
Yes, I remember that because I think one of the candidates, there was an allegation about, or people were alleging that one of the candidates was being asked to step down because it was in the turn
of his
of his. Well, I think,
and that was one that worked for Uzodinma because they said, okay, we are going to start it after Hope. So Hope became the first beneficiary now, which he also signed. So after this, they now know the next zone to provide the governor. After that, so it's now been arranged.
But how do we get there? Because it's just always, you just mentioned Imo, where you would imagine that maybe 80% of the people, 60%, 40%, 60%, 70% will speak Igbo. I know that in Imo, I'm just saying
95%.
95%. I know that there are other, people who live there as well who are not necessarily Igbos. Yeah, okay. But how do we get to that point where people are saying, no, it doesn't matter. Well, even if you speak the same language as I do,
we just want the best.
We want somebody from our own. I mean, what is our own side? How did we get to that point in our election?
I think it's been there before I was born, but it maybe wasn't that pronounced, because I remember people like Nnamdi Azikiwe winning election in the Southwest. I mean, so, but you see, it also speaks to everything about Nigeria to show that we must begin to start a reorientation. Do we see ourselves first as Nigerians? If no, does the average man from Kogi see himself first as a Kogite? If no, then we still have that problem. Because I told somebody, I said, appoint best man today as the group manager director of the NNPC. And I said to myself, everything must be by the books, must be the way it should be. I'm recruiting into an NNPC, I get foreign recruitment agencies, come and let's take everybody on merit. And I do that for 4 years.
I hope you're not conversing for appointments.
No, I'm not. It would be hard for me to go to that.
Go ahead.
And I'm there for 4 years and I'm out. I might not be able to go back to my state. Because when you go there, they will stone you, say, you that spent 4 years, how many of our people did you put there? Despite the fact that they knew that I put the best hands there. Will I say we're a bit selfish, especially the introduction of tribe and ethnicity? We use it most times for selfish reasons. The same you and I'm here in this studio, we're talking, we move from here. Probably there's a business we're doing together, and everything was smooth. Suddenly, there's an election. You suddenly remember, that best man, it's not Yoruba now. How can he become? Whereas, I've been here paying my tax all the while, doing great things for this community. So, it is a major problem. How we got there, I don't know.
Whilst, there is no excuse for it even at the national level. But, one can fathom the idea of, well, we are a lot of ethnicity in this country, a lot of tribes, and people just want just want to say, okay, at least we were there once. But in a state where you have, everybody's same, that's the one that a lot of people can't fathom. How do you get to the point where you say, no, now you have to now split the state and start to do rotation, yes. And that impact of power rotation, where people are not looking at the impact of, governance and the competence of the person who is coming into power, but they just want it to be, as long as it is their brother or their sister who is there, they are fine with it.
And if you look at it, over time, even when your brother and sister was there, they did benefit you. Eventually, we looked at it and we said, no. Classical example, when Obasanjo was president of Nigeria, would the average Southwesterner say, yes, it was our glorious time? They wouldn't say that. When Jonathan was president of Nigeria, would the South Side people say, that was our beautiful... In fact, Yar'Adua was the one that created amnesty for the Niger Delta militants and said, no, this must stop, and created a lot of platform for them to enjoy. I think it was also under the order, we had 13% reservation. When Obasanjo was president, if I got so bad, the allocation of Lagos State was seized under a Southwesterner. So it has not even shown that when your man is there, your sister is there, that it will benefit you.
But could it also be that being the case? It's possible that it doesn't benefit you. But some people also feel like, well, he has done 1 or 2 roads in his state. There are cases like that where, you had a governor who took some major projects to, where they are from. Yes. And people started to think maybe if we vote our own person, we would have the same benefits, because it looks like all of the development are now in that particular area. Did the politicians also enable that kind of thinking pattern?
We've seen that a couple of times, where we say, okay, a governor says to himself, the people say, everything is going to the governor's probably senatorial district. We've seen it. But you see, I've come to say that we actually need, I was chatting with some guys when I said, we need a mind transplant, where we need to transplant a more nationalistic mind into us. Start a reorientation about that which I want to see in my local government. Let it be seen in the sphere of my sphere of contact. That which I want to see in the government, let people see it in the way I rule those that I'm over. Because we can't just continue lamenting like this over these issues, and we're not seeing prospect for change. The average politician talks this tribe, this ethnicity, when it is election time, and he wants to benefit from it. The same people that criticize the Muslim ticket of Ashiwaju and Shetima, immediately after the election, now are coming to seek appointments from the same combination they criticized. It shows that they didn't criticize this in the interest of the nation. They criticized it because there was something they are chasing that ticket denied them. Therefore, we all should know, those of us who are very much involved in all this, should begin to shout that this ethnicity thing is not what we want. It's only used to divide us. It's only used to favor somebody. It's only for somebody to attract something to himself. It is not in the national interest. Neither is it in the state interest. We've seen it over the time, over the years, and it just must stop. But who will stop it? Who will start the process of stopping it? Is it the same person that's benefiting from it? Have you noticed that in Nigeria, when you are in government, they oppose state police? When they are when they are in government, they embrace state police. No, we should have state police. But the moment they leave as governor, they oppose state police. Because they felt, now that I'm governor, if they do state police, it will work for me. But now that you are out of power, you feel that governor will use it. So that's just who we are. It's a problem.
But on the flip side, let's also look at states where, for example, you were talking about Kogi State, where, there is multiplicity or multiple ethnicity, and people feel like, look, we have never even been there at all. Would that also, whilst we're saying vote for competence, wouldn't power rotation also play a role in ensuring that there is some level of stability and security within that particular state?
I asked the question, I said, when would we start putting competence over ethnicity? When? Because we are not ripe also for it now. We must not deceive ourselves. A situation where we have 3 senatorial districts. This one, the Kogi East, the Igalas, have been the ones ruling in Kogi all this while. By dint of divine intervention, it happened to Igbira. When Prince Audu Abubakar passed on before the announcement of the results, and it fell on the man who came second at the primaries to take over the victory of the party, and it fell on Governor Yaya Bello, and became governor of Kogi State. Which, if not for the death of Audu, he would still have been an Igala person. He had the Faleke as deputy. What was the guarantee that he would have supported Faleke to take over from him? Now, the Igalas have been ruling. Now the Ibiras have had it for 8 years. For stability and for equity, like you said, everybody would think it should have gone to the Kogi West, which is the Okun land. Or for whatever reason it didn't happen, I don't know. But reality is that we are not yet there where we say discard zoning. We can't discard zoning now until such a time when we discard zoning in the admission into government schools, when we discard federal character in employment of people into the civil service, when we discard quota in the appointment of judges and even promotion in the civil service. Until we do that, we cannot discard zoning for now, for the purpose of stability.
We even see that at play at the national level where, is a north-south arrangement. And people will say, look, it has helped. It's working. We're at peace. No one is feeling aggrieved. Let's leave it that way because you have, multiple tribes in the country. But I want to go back to, we were discussing the figures earlier, and I see you looking at your time. You're not sure when you're leaving here. Just relax and enjoy yourself in this conversation. All right, so let's go back to those figures. Again, the disparity between the registered voters and the accredited voters has been a huge conversation. But before I was going to ask you a question. I remember that when, you went to talk about, we're talking about ethnicity, but before I get there, I was going to say, if we can get, whose job is it to figure out the major factors, there are minor factors as to the voting pattern. Figure out the major factors, that affect or impact on voting patterns, and then begin to build sensitization and just voter awareness around those issues. Whose job is that?
It's not just somebody's job, but it's a job that should be coordinated by INEC, probably supported by the National Orientation Agency. In the last general election, my group, the Team Nigeria, did a lot of it. We had programs in some central districts where it was voters awareness, where we brought them together. This is how you should vote. When you press your hands like this and the ink smears on 2 places, you miss out. Your vote will not be counted. If you do this, you cannot campaign a day beyond. What they need to know. We go a step further by saying, we have a mechanism to know who is good among these people. We've kind of screened them. This person, sometimes they cut across parties. Because we must just help the people. So INEC should coordinate it, but then the civil society organizations, unfortunately, we now have a situation where the civil society organizations are also either partisan or biased. A couple of times, the journalists who are also supposed to help out, some of them are also biased. We've had issues in recent time of a particular TV anchor, the TV station, where people have issues with him because of his bias. So it is supposed to be something anchored by INEC, the National Orientation Agency, Prime Minister of Information, then the civil society organizations, going all out to ensure that Nigerians are educated on the things they need to know as part of
it's not just even, it's not, and I agree with you on that, but just beyond how to vote, it's more of the voter turnout. Why didn't you show up? When did you vote last? Why did you vote then? Why are you not voting now? And then collate all of those data and say, okay, this is the major reasons why people don't vote. So what kind of awareness should we begin, and sensitization should we begin to create around that? Which
means we are also looking at a situation where we introduce what we call probably voters auditing. We audit the voters, we audit the election to gather all this data that you talked about. Why was this like this? Why didn't it go this way? Why didn't people come out? Why did they even come out? We get out. It still boils down to, I think INEC should have the capacity, the wherewithal, and the resources to do that. Where they cannot do, they contract it to a third party. The third party might even be a foreign organization that can start it and we learn from them. But I think it should be more of an INEC thing. Yeah, we also have some civil society organizations that can also collaborate to do that. We have the Yaga Africa, who are doing extremely well in the electoral process. Probably people, now that you said maybe Team Nigeria can also take it up and say, okay, let's begin to audit our elections and the auditing will encompass a lot of things. Why did they come out? Why did they come out? Why did they vote this way? Why did they do this on election? I think it's something we should be looking at, both INEC and the civil society organization.
And how often should such an auditing be done?
It should be done after every election, after every major national, general election. Every election, even when we have local government elections, there should now be that auditing at that level, so that it can cascade down. When we started from the general elections, to cascade to the local government elections.
All right, so
it's a brilliant suggestion.
And I hope that, those who are responsible are listening, because we really need to know why people don't turn out. And that's where I'm going next. When you look at, a state with over 2 million registered voters, only turning out just about, not even up to 50% of that. At sometimes 25%. Sometimes it's so bad that you will see 18%. In Imo, for example, now we're seeing, good turnout more because it's better than what we saw at the presidential election. But at least at 2 million voters, one should be expecting maybe 1 point something million accredited voters. But
as we were talking, something came to my mind about this also, that could it also be that suddenly the beavers technology is exposing a lot. Probably some people registered even 3, 4, 5 times. A lot of people do multiple registration. I will now have this bogus number of registered voters. On election day, they'll be so scared of going out because they know there's the beavers now. So all this could also be taken by this same auditor that you talked about. And a lot of things will come up. It also occurred to me that, hey, I knew that there was a time that people were registering 3, 4, 5 times. And they were all captured.
I hope if Team Nigeria is taking up that voting auditing, vote auditing, or election auditing, you'll pay me for my intellectual property.
We'll try, if you help us raise funds too.
All right, let's take a break. We still have Mr. Bestman Jumbo Inze in the studio. We'll take a break now. When we return, our conversation will continue. And don't forget that we're expecting collation to reconvene in Bayelsa. The time was supposed to be 6, but it looks like there is a delay. We're expecting that collation to reconvene, and in Kogi as well, where it was set at 7 p.m. So stay with us. He's in Kogi State.
Last election day, I was one that gave him the tell.
Sir. Okay, what's his name? Former member. Jesunogi. Please, what the surname first for this man? For Muyiwa what? Muyiwa Jimo. The other one is okay. When he comes, I'll ask you for the pronunciation of the name. Is he joining now? Good evening, Honorable Jimo. Good evening, sir. I think you're muted. Can you hear me now, sir? Because I can't hear you. Maybe you should unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Unmute.
Say something again, sir. Still can't hear you. Yes? Okay, I can hear you, and that's where the issue is. I know you can hear me because you're responding to me, but I can't hear you. Say something again, sir. Okay. Sir, can you move back a bit, sit back a bit? Can he can he can he go out and join again? Victor, can he leave and join again? You can hear us, we can hear him.